remember my first experience, but I know that when I was a kid, all my friends had Barbies, and I wasn't allowed to have them. So part of the allure of going to other people's houses was being able to play with Barbies, and the more Barbies, the better, because I was denied them. They were the most desirable thing that I could possibly want. My mother said that they were too booksome, and it's weird because my mother, there were no other kinds of toys or dolls that bothered her, and she wasn't reticent about talking about sex or anything like that, but Barbies really bugged her, and so the rule was I wasn't allowed to have them until I was 10, except for Skipper, and I was allowed to have Skipper because she didn't have any boobs.
I remember my first experience with Barbie. I do have a general sense of Barbie as something I got handed down. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so there were a lot of hand-me-downs of Barbie and Barbie's camper and a Barbie townhouse that had an elevator that you pulled the string. And those are the main things I remember.
I had lots of Barbies growing up. I had a sister who was 16 months younger, and we had tons of Barbies and shared them constantly. And so now I kind of like the fantasy Barbie things. I have Tinkerbell there as well. But that's actually my pop culture shelf. So I teach pop culture, and so that's why they're here. I have a love-hate relationship with Barbie.
I had Barbies from the time I was a young child, probably 5 or 6, and so Barbie was just a common toy to play with growing up. I had a lot of them, too many of them, when I look back and think about how much money my family put into Barbies. So it was just always something I played with friends, dressing them up, creating worlds for them, creating, storylines for what they did. So they were just always part of life.
Hard to remember, but I must have been a kid. I know I had the Barbie dream. I had the house, and I think I had the car, and I had lots of different Barbies and Kens. So I don't remember my first experience with Barbie, but I kind of remember many experiences with Barbie.
So I've watched a lot of my friends over the years deal with this issue, and it's this tension between what I experienced is because I couldn't have them, I wanted them more than ever. And you hate to provoke that in a kid, wanting something that you can't have just because you can't have it. I think I was kind of a tomboy. I think I wouldn't have wanted Barbies as much if I had been allowed to have them like other girls. So I guess the answer is I don't know. The other thing that I've learned, both from my own experience and from watching other people, is the power of culture is really intense on children. And so children want things that you don't have any control over. They see the advertisements, they go to their friend's house, they have them at school, and you're such a small influence on your kid's life that what might be more helpful is to let them have Barbies and then talk to them about the issues of Barbie as they get older. That I think is probably more productive than just saying that you can't have them.
Yes, I do let her play with Barbie. She was given her first Barbie when she was 2 by one of my sisters-in-law, and I was appalled and offended and bothered, and Barbie was dressed hoochie. And I didn't have any idea why you would give a 2-year-old a hoochie Barbie doll, but there you have it. And I got to the point of thinking that so long as my daughter understands that she can do or be anything she wants, then I would try not to be hung up by her obsession with all things pink and fancy clothes and playing with Barbie. That she could play with whatever she wanted as long as she understood she could rule the world. And she does seem to have a pretty good understanding that she, in fact, intends to rule the world.
So initially I said no Barbies, but you can have the little kid Barbies, the Cailey dolls, I think they're called. So you can have those. You can have Barbies, but you can't have any brats. But she loves these Monster High dolls. And I like these because they're a little bit more subversive, and you know they're monsters and they don't look like standard people, and so I'm much better with those. But she has a ton of those, and I kind of gave up that fight at some point. One of the things I love about my daughter and her Barbies is that she's actually really gotten into making furniture for the Barbies. So I feel like it's far more creative.
I wouldn't forbid her to play with them, but I would not buy Barbies. I personally object to them. I find them very problematic. And so I wouldn't want to spend my money on them, and I wouldn't want to encourage my children to play with them, boys or girls. But at the same time, there's a cultural expectation for a lot of kids that they have access to these toys, and I wouldn't want to necessarily set my child apart by forbidding them to play with that toy. So I could imagine them coming from aunts and uncles or grandma.
I do, although I do encourage her to think critically about Barbie, but I'm not sure it's sinking in. But I feel if all of her friends play with Barbie, and if I told her she was not allowed to play with Barbie, Barbie would become, the thing she most wanted to play with. So I do let her play with Barbie, and I make lots of comments about how Barbie is too skinny.
I think that it's not exactly Barbies per se. One thing that I've noticed is a real difference in the way that Barbie gets advertised from when I was a kid. Barbie is a more super sexualized, her body's the same, right? But she's advertised as a more sexual being. Her clothing is more sexual, even than it was, for me in the early 70s, where she had a bikini and things like that. But I think that there's a way that she is part of a culture that is about sexualizing young children. She plays a different role, I guess, than she did when I was a kid. But I think now, in this culture where girls are, first of all, pushed to be thin, pushed to wear super sexualized clothing, even young girls know super sexualized music, see super sexualized themes on TV. I think that she's more problematic in that sense now.
I will say that a very strong interest in fashion, or a sense that fashion is important, that what you wear kind of matters. Is that caused by Barbie? I don't know. Is it related to Barbie? Does Barbie maybe reinforce that? I could see that. I think that we as older women maybe obsess about Barbie and body image, and thinking about, these just absurd dimensions that Barbies have, and the sense that would lead young girls or older girls into having, odd body image. I think at that level of young, I don't see that happening.
One of the things I talk about in pop culture is that it's really difficult to know whether a piece of pop culture has actually had an effect. It's actually very difficult to study that, because you cannot separate out all the other variables that would affect girls' decisions about careers and body image. And, does Barbie really reflect... does she reflect merely societal messages, and if she wasn't there, it would be some other kind of object, or does Barbie as an image, really affect how people feel about their body?
I think that Barbie is one more way that girls learn to internalize an unrealistic body image and learn to equate women's value with their appearance, how they're dressed, where it's surface level things as opposed to deeper, more internal things. Internalization works in subtle ways. We don't notice it happens. We don't think about the extent to which we take in these unrealistic ideals, but by being surrounded by them all the time, we do. And so I think Barbie is just one more way that happens, in a very subtle way that seems very normative, but is really problematic.
Barbie obviously presents an unrealistic image of women's bodies, but to the extent to which girls idealize it or internalize it, obviously will vary from girl to girl. I'm sure many girls can play with Barbie and kind of see it as kind of distal from the self. Other girls are going to play with Barbie and wish that they had the body like Barbie. Many girls play with Barbie, and many of them don't go on to have eating disorders and try to become Barbie.
I don't know.
And I actually, well, I don't know.
Talk with them about.
Talk to them about the issues of Barbie.
And I would talk to her.
It would be something we talk about a lot, why I don't like Barbie.
I like your style, Barbie girl.
Diapers. These stupid, I'm sorry, these stupid princess diapers.